Have you ever felt invisible to the people who are supposed to love you most? Have you ever shown up over and over again with your whole heart in your hands, only to be treated like you don't even exist? What would you do if your own mother looked you in the eye and told you that you were never good enough, that you were never wanted? Keisha knows exactly what that feels like, because one cold November night, she was sitting alone in her car outside her apartment, staring at her phone. One new voicemail from Mom. She pressed play, and her mother's voice, cold, sharp, final, said 7 words that shattered her whole world. "Don't bother coming back. We don't need you." Keisha sat there in the dark, tears streaming down her face, replaying that message over and over. She had spent her entire life trying to earn her mother's love, and in 7 words, she finally got her answer. But here's the thing about truth. Sometimes it takes a storm to reveal who was real and who was fake all along. Because by 6 o'clock the next morning, Keisha's phone lit up with 46 missed calls, every single one from the same family who told her to stay away. And they weren't angry anymore. They were begging. Because overnight, the golden child they had chosen over her revealed exactly who she really was, and nothing would ever be the same again. To understand why that voicemail broke Keisha so completely, you have to understand the war she had been fighting her entire life. A war she never signed up for. A war she was losing from the day she was born. Keisha grew up in a small 3-bedroom house with her mother Lorraine and her younger sister Vanessa. Their father left when Keisha was 7 and Vanessa was 4, and from that moment on, something shifted in their mother. Lorraine poured every ounce of her love, her hope, and her attention into one daughter, and it wasn't Keisha. Vanessa was the baby. Vanessa was the pretty one with the light skin and the long hair that Lorraine would braid every morning while Keisha made her own cereal. Vanessa was the smart one who brought home report cards that got framed on the wall, while Keisha's B+ average was met with silence. Vanessa was the one Lorraine would introduce at church with pride, saying, "This is my daughter," while Keisha stood right there, invisible like a ghost in her own family. It started small, the way these things always do, little comments that cut deeper than anyone knew. Keisha remembered being 12 years old, trying on a dress for a school dance, twirling in front of the mirror, feeling pretty for the first time. Her mother walked in, looked her up and down, and said, "That dress would look better on Vanessa. She has the figure for it." Keisha never wore the dress. She told her friends she was sick and didn't go to the dance, and she never forgot the way those words made her feel, like she was a rough draft and her sister was the finished masterpiece. As they got older, the gap only widened. Vanessa was the cheerleader, the prom queen, the one who got a full scholarship to a fancy university. Keisha worked hard too, got decent grades, dreamed of becoming a nurse. But when she told her mother she wanted to apply to nursing school, Lorraine barely looked up from the TV. "That costs money, Keisha. Money we don't have. Maybe you should just get a job." Meanwhile, Lorraine took out loans to buy Vanessa a car for graduation, a brand new Honda Civic with a red bow on top. Keisha got a card with $20 in it and a lecture about being more responsible. And then, at 19, Keisha made the mistake that would define her for the next 17 years. She fell in love. His name was Terrell. He was handsome, charming, and full of promises he never planned to keep. By the time Keisha realized what kind of man he really was, she was already pregnant. When she told her mother, Lorraine didn't hug her. She didn't ask if she was okay. She just shook her head and said, "You have ruined your life,
and you have embarrassed this family. Vanessa would never do something this stupid." Terrell disappeared 2 months before Darius was born, just packed a bag and vanished, leaving Keisha alone with a baby, no degree, and a mother who looked at her like she was a stain on the family name. But Keisha didn't crumble. She got a job as a nursing assistant, working 12-hour shifts at a hospital across town while her neighbor watched the baby. She scraped together enough for a tiny apartment. She raised Darius on her own, and 3 years later she made another mistake and had Naya. Different father, same result. He was gone before the baby could walk. But Keisha kept going. She kept showing up. She kept fighting. And no matter how hard things got, she never stopped trying with her mother. Every Christmas, Keisha would show up at Lorraine's house with gifts for everyone. She would spend her entire paycheck on presents, on groceries, on making sure her kids looked nice, so maybe, just maybe, her mother would finally see her worth. But every year it was the same thing. Vanessa would arrive late in her designer coat, her rich husband Gregory on her arm, and suddenly Keisha was furniture. Lorraine would parade Vanessa's kids around the room, bragging about their private schools and piano lessons, while Keisha and Darius sat quietly in the corner, invisible like their mother. One Christmas, Keisha overheard her mother talking to Aunt Brenda in the kitchen. "It's such a shame about Keisha," Lorraine whispered, not knowing her daughter was just outside the door. 2 kids, no husband, working like a maid at that hospital. "I just don't know where I went wrong with her." Aunt Brenda murmured something sympathetic, and then Lorraine added the words that would haunt Keisha for years. "Thank God I have Vanessa. At least one of my daughters made something of herself." Keisha stood in that hallway, holding a plate of cookies she had baked from scratch at 5 a.m., and something inside her cracked. But she didn't cry. She didn't confront her mother. She just smiled, walked in, set the cookies on the table, and pretended she hadn't heard a thing. That was the role she played, the invisible daughter, the afterthought, the one who was never quite good enough no matter how hard she tried. And the worst part, deep down in a place she hated to admit existed, Keisha started to believe her mother was right. Maybe she was the failure. Maybe Vanessa really was better. Maybe some people are just born to be loved and some people are born to be overlooked. She had no idea that her mother's precious Vanessa was hiding a secret so dark it would blow their entire family apart. And when the truth came out, everything Keisha believed about herself, about her worth, was about to change forever.
It was the first week of November when everything finally shattered. Keisha had been planning for Thanksgiving for months. She had picked up extra shifts at the hospital, working doubles until her feet were numb and her back screamed in protest. She had been saving every spare dollar, tucking cash into an envelope hidden in her sock drawer. She was going to make this year different. She was going to show up with a full spread, her famous mac and cheese, homemade peach cobbler, a 20-pound turkey she had found on sale. She was going to buy new outfits for Darius and Nia, so they looked just as polished as Vanessa's kids. She was going to prove, once and for all, that she was worth something, that she belonged at that table. So, on a Tuesday evening, after putting the kids to bed, Keisha picked up the phone and called her mother. The phone rang 4 times before Lorraine answered. "Hello?" Her mother's voice was flat. Not warm, not welcoming, just flat. "Hey, Mama," Keisha said, forcing brightness into her voice. "I was just calling to confirm Thanksgiving. I'm bringing the turkey this year, and I already got the—" "Keisha," her mother cut her off. The way she said her name made Keisha's stomach drop. "We'll see about Thanksgiving, okay? I'm busy right now. Vanessa is calling on the other line." Click. The phone went dead. Keisha sat there on her couch, staring at the screen that now read, "Call ended." Her mother hadn't said goodbye, hadn't said I love you, hadn't even let her finish her sentence. She had hung up to take Vanessa's call, like Keisha was nothing more than an interruption. She told herself it was fine. Mama was just busy. She would call back later and they would work out the details. But Lorraine didn't call back. Not that night, not the next day. By Thursday, Keisha's anxiety was through the roof. She texted her mother, "Hey mama, just checking on Thanksgiving plans. Let me know." No response. She texted again on Friday, "Mama, are we still doing dinner at your house? I need to know so I can start cooking." Nothing. Radio silence. And then on Saturday night, the voicemail came. Keisha had just gotten home from a brutal 12-hour shift. Her scrubs were stained, her hair was falling out of its ponytail, and all she wanted was a hot shower and her bed. She tossed her keys on the counter and glanced at her phone. One missed call, one new voicemail. From Mom. A tiny spark of hope flickered in her chest. Maybe Lorraine was finally calling with Thanksgiving plans. Maybe she would apologize for being so distant. Keisha pressed play and held the phone to her ear. Her mother's voice filled the silence, cold, clipped, and cutting. "Keisha, it's your mother. I'm calling to tell you not to bother coming for Thanksgiving this year. Vanessa thinks it's best if you stay home. She says you always bring drama, and she doesn't want her kids exposed to that. Honestly, I agree with her. We don't need you here. We never really did. Have a good holiday." Keisha's knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of the counter to stop herself from falling. She played it again and again and again. Each time the words hit harder. We don't need you here. We never really did. Vanessa thinks it's best. Of course Vanessa thinks it's best. Vanessa had finally done what she had been trying to do for 30 years. Push Keisha out of the family completely. And their mother had let her. No, their mother had helped her. Keisha slid down the kitchen cabinets until she was sitting on the cold tile floor, her phone clutched in her trembling hands. The sobs came hard and fast, shaking her whole body. She cried like she hadn't cried since Terrell left. She cried for the little girl who tried on a dress and was told she wasn't pretty enough. She cried for the teenager who got a $20 card while her sister got a car. She cried for every Christmas she showed up with gifts and left with nothing but heartbreak. She cried for 36 years of trying and failing to earn her own mother's love. And then, somewhere in the middle of that grief, something else rose up. Anger. Hot, righteous, long overdue anger. Keisha wiped her face with the back of her hand and looked at her phone. She went to her contacts. She found Mom, and she pressed block. Then she found Vanessa, block. Then Gregory, Vanessa's smug husband who always looked at Keisha like she was the help, block. She blocked every single person who had ever made her feel like she wasn't enough. And for the first time in her life, she chose herself. The next morning, she sat her kids down at the kitchen table. Darius looked up with those big brown eyes, so much like his father's, but so much kinder. "Darius, Mama, are we going to Grandma's for Thanksgiving?" Keisha took a deep breath. "No, baby, we're not. This year, we're going to have our own Thanksgiving, just the three of us. We're going to cook together, watch movies, and be thankful for each other. Doesn't that sound nice?" Nia clapped her little hands. "Can we have extra pie?" Keisha laughed, but it was a broken laugh, hiding the tears she refused to let fall. "Yes, baby, we can have all the pie we want." That night, after the kids were asleep, Keisha lay in her bed staring at the ceiling. She had done it. She had walked away. She was free from the constant rejection, the endless disappointment, the soul-crushing hope that things might be different this time. But freedom didn't feel like relief. It felt like grief. It felt like finally admitting that she would never have a mother who loved her the way she deserved. She closed her eyes,
tears sliding silently down her temples and soaking into the pillow. She fell asleep believing she was truly alone, believing that her family was gone forever. She had no idea that in just a few hours, her phone would erupt with 46 missed calls, and every single one of them would be her family, desperate and crying, begging her to come back, because the golden child they had chosen over her was about to be exposed, and the truth was uglier than anyone could imagine.
Keisha's eyes snapped open at 6:03 a.m. Something was wrong. Her phone was buzzing. Not a single buzz like a text message, not the gentle pulse of an alarm. This was relentless, angry, desperate buzzing that wouldn't stop. She reached over to her nightstand, her eyes still blurry with sleep, and grabbed her phone. The screen was lit up like a Christmas tree. Notification after notification after notification, scrolling across the display faster than she could read them. Missed call, missed call, missed call, voicemail, text message, missed call, voicemail, text message. Her heart started pounding before her brain even caught up. She sat up in bed, squinting at the screen, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. And then she remembered. She had blocked everyone. So how were these calls coming through? She opened her settings with trembling fingers and saw that sometime in the middle of the night, half asleep, she must have unblocked the numbers, or maybe her phone had glitched. She didn't know. She didn't care. All she knew was that her screen now showed 46 missed calls and 23 voicemails, all received between midnight and 6 in the morning, all from the same people who had told her to stay away. Her mother, 15 missed calls. Her Aunt Brenda, 12 missed calls. Her cousin Trina, 8 missed calls. Even Gregory, Vanessa's husband, the man who had never spoken more than 10 words to her in 15 years, had called 3 times. And the texts. Oh God, the texts. She scrolled through them, her hand shaking so hard she almost dropped the phone. From Aunt Brenda at 12:47 a.m., "Keisha, baby, please call me back, it's urgent." From Aunt Brenda at 1:15 a.m., "Keisha, I know you're upset, but please answer your phone. Something happened." From her mother at 1:32 a.m., "Keisha, I need you, please." From her mother, the woman who 12 hours ago had told her she was nothing, the woman who said they didn't need her, now typing the words, "I need you." Keisha stared at that text for a long time, her chest tight with a confusing swirl of emotions, anger, fear, suspicion, and somewhere deep beneath it all, that stubborn flicker of hope that refused to die no matter how many times it got stumped on. Something was very, very wrong. She scrolled to the voicemails and pressed play on the first one. It was Aunt Brenda, her voice high and panicked. "Keisha, honey, I don't know if you're getting these messages, but you need to call me back right now. It's about your mama. She's in the hospital. And it's about Vanessa. Baby, everything is falling apart over here. Please, just call me. Please." Keisha's blood ran cold. Hospital? She skipped to the next voicemail. Aunt Brenda again, this time crying. "Keisha, your mama had some kind of heart episode. The doctors say it was stress-induced. She's stable, but she's asking for you. Only you. Please, baby, I know she hurt you, but she needs you right now." Keisha's mind was reeling. A heart episode? Stress-induced? What kind of stress could possibly? And then she got to the third voicemail. This one was from Cousin Trina, and Trina was never one to sugarcoat anything. "Girl, I know you blocked everybody, and honestly, I don't blame you after that voicemail Auntie Lorraine left. But you need to sit down for this, because I'm about to tell you some tea that's gonna blow your whole mind. You know your perfect sister Vanessa, the one who can do no wrong, the one Auntie always brags about? Well, guess what? She's a thief, Keisha, a straight-up criminal. She's been stealing from your mama for years. I'm talking tens of thousands of dollars. She forged checks, she opened credit cards in your mama's name, she drained her savings account. Your mama found out last night, confronted her about it, and Vanessa— Trina paused and I heard her take a shaky breath. Vanessa lost it, Keisha. She screamed at your mama, called her horrible things, called her a burden, said she couldn't wait for her to die so she could sell the house. She said all of this to your mama's face, and then she just walked out, left your mama on the floor crying. That's when your mama's chest started hurting. That's when they called the ambulance. Keisha, I know things have been hard between you and Auntie, but she's asking for you. Only you, not Vanessa. You. Call us back. Keisha sat frozen in her bed, the phone pressed against her ear even though the voicemail had ended. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. Vanessa. Golden child Vanessa. Perfect Princess Vanessa, who got the car and the compliments and the unconditional love. Vanessa had been stealing from their mother this whole time. While Keisha was scraping together pennies to buy Christmas presents that nobody appreciated, Vanessa was opening credit cards in their mama's name and maxing them out. While Keisha was being told she wasn't needed, Vanessa was draining their mother's life savings and waiting for her to die. The rage that filled Keisha's chest was unlike anything she had ever felt. It was hot and cold at the same time. It was righteous and bitter. It was the culmination of 36 years of being told she was less than, that she was the disappointment, that she was the one who ruined her life, while the real villain sat at the head of the table being praised. But beneath the rage there was something else, something complicated. Her mother was in the hospital. Her mother was asking for her. The same mother who broke her heart 1,000 times was now lying in a hospital bed, calling out for the daughter she had always overlooked. Keisha didn't know what to feel. She didn't know if she wanted to rush to that hospital or throw her phone across the room and go back to sleep. She sat there for a long time, watching the sun rise through her bedroom window, the light slowly filling the room and casting shadows across the wall. And then Darius appeared in her doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Mama, you okay? I heard your phone buzzing a lot." Keisha looked at her son, her beautiful, kind, innocent son who had never made her feel like she wasn't enough. She thought about what kind of mother she wanted to be. She thought about the cycle of pain and rejection that had defined their family for generations. She thought about whether she wanted to pass that poison on to her children, or whether she wanted to be the one who finally broke the chain. She took a deep breath, wiped her eyes, and made a decision. "Get dressed, baby," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. "We're going to see Grandma." The drive to the hospital felt like it lasted a lifetime. Keisha gripped the steering wheel so tight her knuckles ached, her eyes fixed on the road but her mind 1,000 miles away. Darius and Naya sat quietly in the back seat, sensing that something heavy was happening, too young to understand but old enough to know not to ask questions. The radio was off. The only sound was the hum of the engine and Keisha's own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She had rehearsed what she would say 100 times on the way there. She would be calm. She would be strong. She would walk in, check on her mother, and leave without letting anyone see how much pain she was carrying. She would not cry. She would not beg for apologies. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her broken. But the moment she pulled into the hospital parking lot and saw Aunt Brenda standing outside the entrance, pacing back and forth with a tissue pressed to her nose, all of that rehearsal went out the window. Aunt Brenda spotted the car immediately. She rushed over before Keisha even had a chance to unbuckle her seatbelt, yanking open the driver's door and pulling Keisha into a crushing hug. "Oh, thank God. Thank God you came. Keisha, baby, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I should have stood up for you years ago.
I should have said something. Her voice broke into sobs, and Keisha stood there stiffly, arms at her sides, not returning the hug, but not pushing her away either. She didn't have the energy for either. "Where is she?" Keisha asked, her voice flat. And Brenda pulled back, wiping her eyes. "Room 414, 4th floor. She's stable now, but Keisha, she looks bad. And she hasn't stopped asking for you. Not once. She keeps saying your name over and over." Keisha nodded, then turned to her kids. "Stay with Auntie Brenda, okay? Mom'll be right back." Darius looked up at her with worried eyes. "Is Grandma gonna be okay?" Keisha paused. She didn't know the answer to that question. She didn't know if anything was ever gonna be okay again. "I hope so, baby," she finally said. "I hope so." The elevator ride to the 4th floor was the longest 30 seconds of her life. Keisha stood alone in that metal box, watching the numbers climb, her reflection staring back at her in the polished doors. She looked tired. She looked worn, but there was something else in her eyes now, something that hadn't been there before. Still, she had spent her whole life being soft for people who didn't deserve it. She had bent and bent and bent until she nearly broke. But not today. Today, she was walking into that room on her own terms. The doors opened. She stepped out. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and sorrow, the way all hospitals do. She passed nurses pushing carts and doctors checking clipboards, but she didn't see any of them. Her feet carried her forward like she was on autopilot, one step after another, until she was standing in front of room 414. The door was slightly open. She could hear the soft beeping of machines inside, and she could hear something else. Crying. Soft, broken crying. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. Her mother looked like she had aged 20 years overnight. Lorraine was lying in the hospital bed, propped up against thin pillows, her face pale and drawn. Her hair, usually perfectly styled, was flat and tangled against the pillow. An IV dripped steadily into her arm. A heart monitor beeped in the corner, tracking every fragile beat. And when Lorraine saw Keisha standing in the doorway, her face crumpled completely. "Keisha," she sobbed, reaching out a trembling hand. "Keisha, you came. You came. I didn't think you would come." Keisha didn't move. She stood just inside the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest, a wall of protection around her shattered heart. "I told you not to," she said quietly. "You told me you didn't need me, that you never did." Lorraine's face twisted with anguish. "I was wrong. I was so wrong, baby. I don't know why I said those things. Vanessa, she got in my head. She was always telling me things about you, making up stories, saying you talked bad about me behind your back. And I believed her. I believed her because she was always right here, always in my ear. And you," she trailed off, more tears spilling down her hollow cheeks. "And I was working," Keisha finished, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "I was raising my kids alone. I was sending you money I couldn't afford to send. I was showing up to every holiday with gifts you never appreciated and food you never thanked me for. I was doing everything I could to prove I was worth loving, and you were in Vanessa's ear listening to her lies." Lorraine nodded, her whole body shaking. I know, and I hate myself for it. I wasted so many years, baby, so many years treating you like you were less than, and you were the good one all along. You were always the good one." For a moment, Keisha felt something inside her soften, just a crack in the wall, a tiny sliver of the little girl who just wanted her mother's approval. But then she heard footsteps behind her, sharp, clicking footsteps that she'd recognize anywhere, and a voice that made her blood turn to ice. What in the hell is she doing here? Keisha turned around slowly, and there was Vanessa, standing in the doorway like she owned the place, her designer handbag on her arm, her hair blown out, her face twisted into a sneer of disgust. Even now, even after everything, she still looked at Keisha like she was dirt on her shoe. "I asked you a question," Vanessa snapped, stepping into the room. "What are you doing here? This is family business. You don't belong here." Keisha stared at Vanessa. She stared at this woman she had spent her whole life competing with, comparing herself to, trying to measure up to. And for the first time ever, she didn't see a winner. She didn't see the golden child. She saw a thief, a liar, a fraud dressed in expensive clothes. "I don't belong here," Keisha repeated, her voice dangerously calm. "I don't belong here." She took a step towards Vanessa, then another. Vanessa's confident expression flickered just for a second. "You stole from her, Vanessa. You forged checks. You opened credit cards in her name. You drained her savings while she was worried about making rent. And then when she found out, you screamed at her. You called her a burden. You told her you couldn't wait for her to die." Vanessa's face went red, pure cherry red. Her eyes darted between Lorraine and Keisha, looking for an escape, looking for an angle. "I was gonna pay it back," she stammered. "I just needed time. Gregory's business was struggling and you took from an old woman instead of getting a job." Keisha cut her off. "You took from the same woman who gave you everything, who worshipped the ground you walked on, who threw me away like garbage so she could keep praising you." She was in Vanessa's face, years of fury pouring out like lava. "I worked double shifts, Vanessa. I scrubbed floors. I emptied bedpans. I went without food so my kids could eat. And the whole time you was sitting in your big house with your fancy car, stealing from our mother and letting her think I was the disappointment." Vanessa stepped back, bumping into the doorframe. "You're crazy. You're just jealous because Mama always loved me more." And that was when Aunt Brenda appeared in the doorway behind Vanessa and Cousin Trina and two more cousins Keisha hadn't seen in years. They all stood there, arms crossed, staring at Vanessa with disgust. "Nobody loves a thief, Vanessa," Aunt Brenda said coldly, "and nobody's believing your lies anymore. We all know what you did. The whole family knows." Trina stepped forward, holding up a phone. "I already sent the bank statements to everybody, and guess what? Gregory's been calling me all morning asking questions. Something tells me that fancy house of yours isn't gonna feel so fancy when he finds out your wife is a criminal." Vanessa's face went white, pure, bloodless white. She looked at Lorraine, desperately searching for the ally she had always counted on. Mama, please, don't let them do this to me. I'm your baby. I'm your favorite. You always said I was your favorite." But Lorraine just turned her head away, slowly, deliberately. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. That single gesture said everything. Vanessa's chest heaved, her perfect facade shattered completely, and then, with nothing else to say, she turned and ran. She pushed past Aunt Brenda and Trina and disappeared down the hospital hallway, her heels clicking frantically against the linoleum, the sound of her escape fading until there was only silence. Keisha stood in the middle of the room, her heart pounding, her hands trembling with adrenaline. She had never stood up to Vanessa like that before. She had never stood up to anybody like that before. It felt terrifying, and it felt like freedom. Lorraine was crying again, softly, brokenly. She reached out a hand toward Keisha, her fingers shaking. "Keisha, please. I know I don't deserve it, but please, will you forgive me?" Keisha looked at her mother's hand. She looked at the woman who made her feel invisible for 36 years. She looked at the woman who was now reaching for her like she was the only lifeline left. And Keisha made a choice. She didn't take her mother's hand, not yet. Instead, she pulled up a chair and sat down beside the bed. Close, but not touching. Present, but not surrendering. I'm not going to forgive you today, Mama, she said quietly, her voice steady. You broke my heart too many times for that. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. We're going to figure this out, but things are going to be different now. You don't get to treat me like a backup plan anymore. You don't get to throw me away when Vanessa's around and call me when she's gone. Either I'm your daughter, your real daughter, or I'm nothing. You choose. Lorraine sobbed harder, but she nodded. Over and over, she nodded. You're my daughter, she whispered. You've always been my daughter. I was just too blind to see what I had. Keisha sat back in the chair, emotionally exhausted, physically drained, but somehow lighter than she had felt in years. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't know if she would ever fully forgive her mother. But she knew one thing for certain. She was done being invisible. She was done begging for scraps. And from this day forward, anyone who wanted a place in her life was going to have to earn it. The weeks that followed were messy, painful, and nothing like the fairy tale endings Keisha used to dream about as a little girl. There was no magical moment where everything was suddenly fixed. No tearful family reunion where everyone hugged and forgot the past. Real healing doesn't work that way. Real healing is slow and awkward and full of setbacks. But for the first time in her life, Keisha wasn't doing it alone. Lorraine was released from the hospital 5 days after Keisha's visit. The doctor said her heart was stable, but she needed to avoid stress and make serious lifestyle changes. She couldn't live alone anymore, not safely, and her savings were gone, drained by the daughter she had trusted most. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. When Aunt Brenda asked Lorraine where she wanted to go after discharge, Lorraine didn't hesitate. Keisha's, she whispered. If she'll have me, I want to go to Keisha's. Keisha got that call while she was folding laundry in her tiny apartment, Naya playing on the floor beside her. Her first instinct was to say no. Her apartment was small, her life was already stretched thin, and the wounds were still so fresh they bled every time she thought about them. But then she looked at Naya, humming happily as she dressed her dolls, completely unaware of the generational trauma swirling above her head. And Keisha thought about what she wanted her daughter to learn about family, about forgiveness, about strength. She can come, Keisha said into the phone, her voice tight. But this isn't permanent, and we're doing this my way. Aunt Brenda cried with relief. Thank you, baby. Thank you. You're a better woman than any of us deserve. Keisha didn't argue with that. So Lorraine moved into Keisha's spare room, the room that used to be Keisha's home office, the tiny corner where she paid bills and dreamed of a better life. Keisha gave it up without complaint, setting up a small bed and a nightstand and a lamp that cast warm light across the walls. The first few days were unbearable. Lorraine cried constantly, apologizing over and over until the words started to lose meaning. Keisha would nod, say, I hear you, and walk away because she wasn't ready to say, I forgive you yet. She didn't know if she ever would be. But she showed up. Every single day she showed up. She cooked her mother's meals. She made sure she took her medication. She drove her to doctor's appointments and sat in the waiting room, scrolling through her phone to avoid conversation, but still present, still there. And slowly, something started to shift. It started with small things. Lorraine began watching Keisha with different eyes, noticing how she braided Naya's hair every morning with patient, gentle hands, noticing how she helped Darius with his homework every night, never raising her voice even when he got frustrated, noticing how she juggled 2 jobs and 2 kids and a sick mother and never once complained, never once asked for recognition, never once demanded a thank you. One evening, about 3 weeks after Lorraine moved in, Keisha came home from a double shift at the hospital.
It was almost midnight. Her feet were screaming. Her back ached. All she wanted was to collapse into bed. But when she opened the front door, she stopped. The apartment smelled different. It smelled like food, real food. Pot roast and vegetables, the kind of meal Lorraine used to make when Keisha was a child, back before Vanessa was born, back when it was just the two of them and things were simpler. Keisha walked into the kitchen and found her mother standing at the stove, stirring a pot, looking exhausted but determined. "Mama, what are you doing? You're supposed to be resting." Lorraine turned around, and for the first time since she'd arrived, there was something in her eyes besides guilt. There was purpose. "I wanted to do something for you," she said quietly. "I can't work. I can't pay rent. I can't give you back the years I wasted, but I can cook. I can be here when you come home. I can try to be the mother I should have been all along." Keisha stood frozen in the doorway. She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. She just walked over, picked up a spoon, and started stirring the pot beside her. They cooked in silence, side by side, and it was the closest thing to peace either of them had felt in years. As for Vanessa, karma didn't just catch up with her. It ran her down like a freight train. Gregory filed for divorce within 2 weeks of finding out about the fraud. Turns out, Vanessa hadn't just stolen from their mother, she had been siphoning money from their joint accounts too, hiding credit card debt, lying about shopping sprees she claimed were business expenses. Gregory was a proud man with a reputation to protect. The moment the truth came out, he was done. Vanessa tried to fight for the house, but the prenup she signed, the one she bragged about for years because she thought it protected her, actually protected him. She got nothing, less than nothing. She got served. And then the bank got involved. Lorraine, with Keisha's help, reported the forged checks and the fraudulent credit cards. There was an investigation, there were charges. Vanessa tried to talk her way out of it, flashing her smile and her designer clothes, but the evidence was overwhelming. She pleaded guilty to avoid a trial and was sentenced to 18 months in a minimum security facility, plus full restitution of the $47,000 she had stolen. The day the verdict was announced, Trina called Keisha with the news. Girl, she cried like a baby in that courtroom, kept looking around like someone was gonna save her. Nobody even showed up for her. Not Gregory, not her friends, not Mama. Nobody. Keisha listened in silence. She thought she would feel satisfaction. She thought she would feel vindicated, triumphant, finally proven right after all these years. But she didn't. She just felt tired and sad. Sad for the sister she never really had. Sad for the family that could have been so different if Vanessa had just been honest. Sad for all the wasted years and the broken trust and the love that got twisted into something ugly. "I hope she gets help in there," Keisha said finally, her voice thick with emotion. "I hope she learns what it feels like to scrub a toilet for once." Trina sucked her teeth. "Girl, you're too nice. I hope she learns what it feels like to scrub a toilet for once." Keisha laughed, but it was a soft laugh, a weary laugh. She had spent too much energy on anger. She didn't have room for it anymore. Thanksgiving came around again, exactly 1 year after that voicemail had shattered Keisha's world. But this year was different. This year, Keisha's tiny apartment was full of people. Aunt Brenda came, bringing her famous sweet potato pie. Trina came, bringing her loud mouth and her contagious laugh. 2 more cousins drove down from out of state, wanting to be part of something real. Lorraine sat in the corner, still fragile, still quiet, but present, watching, grateful. And at the center of it all was Keisha, standing in her kitchen, surrounded by the people who had finally seen her. Darius and Naya ran around the apartment, chasing each other, laughing, their joy filling every corner of the room. When it came time to say grace, everyone joined hands around the table. Aunt Brenda asked Keisha to lead the prayer. Keisha bowed her head. She thought about everything she had been through, the rejection, the betrayal, the nights she cried on the kitchen floor, the morning she dragged herself to work on 2 hours of sleep, the voicemail that told her she wasn't needed. And then she thought about now, about this table of people who finally saw her, about her mother sitting 3 feet away, looking at her like she was the most precious thing in the world, about her children, healthy and happy and loved, and the life she had built, not because anyone gave it to her, but because she refused to give up on herself. "Thank you, Lord," Keisha said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for this food. Thank you for this family, the family we're building now, not the one that hurt us before. Thank you for second chances. Thank you for the strength to keep going when I wanted to quit. And thank you for teaching me that my worth was never determined by the people who couldn't see it. Amen." "Amen," everyone echoed. And then they ate. They laughed, they told stories, and argued about football, and passed dishes back and forth across the table. It wasn't perfect. It would never be perfect. Some wounds take a lifetime to heal, and some never heal completely. But it was real. It was honest. It was hers. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the kids were asleep, Keisha sat alone on her couch. The apartment was quiet. The dishes were done. The leftovers were packed away. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to her voicemail. There was still one saved message there, the message from a year ago, her mother's voice, cold and final. "Don't bother coming back. We don't need you. We never really did." Keisha listened to it one last time. She let the words wash over her, not with pain this time, but with something else, perspective. She thought about who she was when she first heard that message, broken, defeated, convinced she was worthless. And she thought about who she was now, a mother, a survivor, a woman who had walked through fire and come out the other side stronger than she ever imagined. She smiled softly. Then she pressed delete. The message disappeared, and with it, the last chain that had been holding her to the past. She was free. Keisha didn't realize it until weeks later, but the night she deleted that voicemail was the night her entire story changed. Not because her mother had apologized, not because Vanessa had finally been exposed, not because the family had chosen her for once. It changed because for the first time in 36 years, Keisha chose herself. She was standing at the kitchen sink, washing the last of the Thanksgiving dishes, the warm water running over her hands as she stared out the window. Darius and Naya were in the living room, building a fort out of couch cushions. Lorraine sat in an armchair nearby, watching them with soft eyes, occasionally reaching out to pick up a fallen blanket or hand them a pillow. The scene was so simple, so ordinary, and yet, to Keisha, it felt like a miracle. Not the kind of miracle that falls out of the sky and fixes everything overnight. The kind you build, piece by fragile piece, every time you decide not to give up on yourself. She thought back to all the years she had spent chasing crumbs of affection from people who couldn't see her worth. All the nights she lay awake, replaying every conversation, wondering what she could have said or done differently to finally be enough. All the time she let other people's opinions define her, like they were the truth carved in stone. And now, standing in her own kitchen, in her own life that she had built with her own two hands, she finally understood something she wished she had known a long time ago. Their blindness was never her burden to carry. Her mother hadn't failed to love her because Keisha was unlovable. Vanessa hadn't stepped on her because Keisha was weak. They had made their choices, and now Keisha was making hers. She wiped her hands on a towel and leaned against the counter, watching her children laugh, feeling a quiet strength settle in her chest. She could care for her mother without erasing herself. She could set boundaries without being cruel. She could let Vanessa face the consequences of her own actions without celebrating her downfall. She could love people and still refuse to let them hurt her. For so long, she thought forgiveness meant pretending the past never happened. Now she understood it could also mean this: looking the past straight in the eye, learning from it, and then finally putting it down so it couldn't own her anymore. Later that night, as she tucked Naya into bed,
Her daughter wrapped her small arms around Keisha's neck and mumbled, half asleep, "You're the best mommy in the world." Keisha felt her throat tighten, but this time the tears that burned her eyes weren't from pain. They were from gratitude, because no matter what her mother had said, no matter what her sister had done, this was the truth that mattered. She was enough. She had always been enough. And the people who were meant to be in her life, they saw it. If someone had told her on the night she first heard that cruel voicemail that 1 year later she would be standing here, stronger, clearer, surrounded by a family she chose and who chose her back, she wouldn't have believed it. But that's the quiet power of walking away from the places that only know how to hurt you. Sometimes when you finally stop begging to sit at the wrong table, you realize you were meant to build your own.